Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Other Minds and Hands. This is episode number 85. And this evening, Maggie and I, or it definitely feels like evening because even here in the East
Dark.
Coast, it's dark already here. So,
Although, should I turn my laptop around and
oh
show
yeah,
them what happened
exactly.
in my house this weekend?
Speaking of seasons advancing, seasons are advancing rapidly in Maggie's household.
I mean, I love Christmas anyway, but when a 3-year-old says let's decorate, I'm like, okay,
Yeah, perfect, perfect.
I'm all right with it.
Yeah,
My husband not so much, but I'm all right with it.
Well, this evening we wanted to get back to the War of the Rohirrim Tapestry. We were kind of we were doing some kind of big picture analysis. This sort of an image. I always find released images, like not just like, and here's a still from the film, like that's kind of interesting to think about why they chose that one, but actual like promotional images that are like put together and stuff, there's real craft there, and it's really interesting to see what those are suggesting and how those are functioning.
And just in terms of like development, yeah, it's not just a scene that we're picking that's going to be part of a bigger movie. It's like, no, this is a whole team's job is to
Yes.
develop this image and to think about what it could show and how it could show it. Like this was their job. It's not
Yeah.
fitting into a bigger thing. I love that.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool. So anyway, we're looking at big picture stuff. We were talking about like symmetry and balance and the color tone of balance, and we were looking at some of the color themes like the gold associated with Hera going all the way through, and several other things like that. I wanted to come down into some more. What we didn't do is really kind of talk about story. We were kind of sort of taking several steps back and looking at the big picture of what's going on. And now let's see. And I'm still, Maggie, just really, I can't like, I almost overlooked it at the beginning, that quiet center, with the guy
Yeah,
and the
right.
horse under the words. It's even small in the sense that it's kind of contained visual, like it's just it doesn't even take up one whole vertical section.
Yeah.
Cause you've got the fiery bits above it and below it that kind of box it in. But that one sad, cool center of the whole picture. That was my favorite thing that I learned last time when we were looking at these sorts of things. But let's kind of go through
Yeah, I want to
piece by
like dig
piece.
into the story because there's loads of stuff happening here that I can't
Yeah.
wait for you to explain. Like,
Okay. Well, and
here's
some
what
of
I'm
it I
seeing.
might
What
be
do you
able to,
think?
and some of it I might not. So, okay,
That's okay.
let's start. Let's go left to right. This first scene here. Okay. So the first scene, we've got Hera in the middle, and the conceptual idea of this story seems relatively clear to me. So we've got on the right, we have the Rohirrim. This is King Helm with the white beard, clearly. And his son next to him, the prince. And Hera is in the middle. On the left-hand side, we have that's Freka, the big guy, the big
Mm.
balding guy. On the right is Freka. And Freka is one of the, he's in Rohan. This is not a foreign potentate or something. He is one of Helm's thanes, basically, but he's an uppity thane. There are two things about him. One is that he is depicted as being like arrogant or at least overconfident in how he thinks he can throw his weight around. There's even a play on that. He's large. He's like a big guy and a fat guy. And there's that, but there's also that kind of like mob boss sense of like, he is a man who throws his weight around. Right.
Hmm.
Anyway, so Freka, but the other thing that's distinctive about Freka is that he's from the Westfold, and he is of mixed Rohirric and Dunlending blood. So there is the way they've depicted him is very with like facial tattoos and stuff like
Mhm.
that is very other, right, compared to the Rohirrim. I mean,
And
there's
very, very distinctive and very like tribal.
yes, exactly, and
And the
that's I
insignia on
yes.
his I don't know what that is, chest. And the shield and things like that.
I think that if I did not know anything about the story, I would think that this was a meeting of the King of Rohan with like the chief of a foreign
Hmm.
nation, basically. I would think this was some kind of summit meeting between potentially hostile nations. According to the story in the book, that's not the case. But again, he's kind of Freka is this kind of marginal figure that he's Rohirric, but he's also connected with the Dunlendings. And Helm within the story calls him Dunlending, intending it to be an insult, basically. So anyway, yeah, that's and then the guy to the left of him is Wolf, his son. The scene which begins the whole problem is when Freka is suggesting that his son Wolf marries Helm's daughter. This is where Hera's character is actually, as Kirsten was saying, is not only mentioned in the story, but is like the whole premise of the story.
Yeah.
She's the one who's going to be married off. So her positioning, of course, as being in between the two of them, right? But also, as you were pointing out last week, small and diminished. She's so she's in the middle, but she's marginalized, right? She's being loomed over by these much larger, more powerful male figures.
And I started looking at some of the other stuff in this, and if you kind of squint a little bit and just take in the negative space, like not what she's occupying,
Yeah.
it's very much like a keyhole shape,
Right.
you know. And there's also these braziers on either side that to me looked very much like dungeon doors. You know,
Right.
there's this whole like locked up
Yeah.
idea.
The bars
She's
and the braziers are very suggestive in that way.
and she's facing the guard, and who, you know, like there's
Yeah.
not a guard on the other side, so she's facing the guard. She's looking backwards. She's not looking forwards. So there's just this very feeling of trapped.
Yes, I agree. The looking backwards is especially interesting. Her face and her body is turned like 45 degrees towards, like, on the one hand, that puts her kind of shoulder to shoulder with her father at a distance,
Hmm.
but anyway, she's facing backwards, right? As you say,
Hmm.
she's not facing forwards. The foreground is
And
really interesting to me. The little boy in the foreground. I don't know what's up
mhm,
with him. Like that to me is one of the most curious things about the composition of this little segment.
mhm.
The guy on the right, I'm looking at the three people with their backs to us in the front of the picture, right?
Yeah,
The guy on the right over here looks like some sort of guard or something. He looks like he may be in a similar outfit to the
similar
guard we see in
helmet.
the
Yeah.
back. The guy on the left with no helmet looks like a commoner of some kind or a
Hmm.
soldier, but why doesn't he have a helmet on?
And
And
no
then there's
insignia.
the little there's the kid. And now keep in mind, people who have been reading like interviews or stuff where these are identified, this is not, I don't want to know. Like that's
Yeah.
not the point here. The point here is not to get, that will in fact actually cloud this analysis.
Yeah.
What we're doing here is an analysis of this image. And as they didn't put floaty names in the image, I don't care who they are. I'm trying to take in what they're communicating through these
You're trying to
images.
grok what they're showing you.
That's it. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to go ahead and say, oh, but like this story was revealed in an interview, that's to tell me what they think they're conveying in this.
Yeah.
But that's a quite different thing from say, this is why, like, again, like it's quite like when an author says this is the point of the book. And I'm always like that. It is an academically interesting point that you have said that. However,
Yes.
I'm now going to read the book and I'll tell you what I think the point of the book is. That tells me what you were hoping to convey, right? I'll read it and I'll give you my view on whether or not you succeeded in conveying that, right? But just like to use a metaphor I've made or a simile I've made before, it's like when somebody says, oh, I was just trying to be funny. But whether or not you were funny is up to me to decide, not up to you to decide. You can tell me that you meant it to be funny, but I can make up, I mean, we've all known situations where somebody, you can't always, for various reasons, trust when somebody says, I was just trying to be funny when they said something, right? Anyway, it's that's why, like, again, I don't care if if articles or interviews or anything have identified who the guy is in the middle. It doesn't matter. Like, for the sake of understanding this image, it doesn't matter. And in fact, I think it even goes counter to understanding what's going on here.
Well, and the plain clothes element that you pointed out, that just kind of put the relationship a little bit different to me, of the taller guy with the plain clothes next to the shorter guy.
Yeah.
Originally I thought, oh, maybe Hobbit or something like that, but he does have some sort of a collar on, and I'm like, maybe he's a princeling and this guy is his, like, caretaker or something. There's another dynamic then brought into it when you think about it in terms of their relationships with each other. I don't know, but we're seeing something unclear.
Exactly, impossible. And the way that they form, like, a fourth side of this box is the thing that is kind of confusing to me, right? Because
it's also what brings.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
It's also what brings us into the picture, because we're standing behind them now.
Yes.
So, like, that's what gives us perspective.
Yeah, our vantage point is their vantage point. It's like we're standing with them, right?
In the crowd, right? Yeah,
exactly. Right. As Eric says, they are the fourth wall, essentially, right? Yes, exactly. They're standing along it, right? Yes. So that's and it's odd. If that is, the one thing that is relevant to me, again, is not the, like, oh, we've been told that person is this other person. What does matter to me is if there are internal connections. Like, if I had reason to believe that little guy in the middle is one of the little guys in this other picture who do seem clearly to be halflings, then that would be relevant.
But I don't think so.
I don't see clear evidence. I mean, it could be, but I don't. The image doesn't seem to me to be solidifying that identification. The clothing is quite different.
Clothing's so different.
Even the hair. Both of the halfling figures have their hair parted in the middle, or almost nearly in the middle, and this guy doesn't have a part to his hair at all. Again, maybe it's just seen from behind, whatever. But anyway, this image does not seem to me to be insisting on a connection between them. But yeah, it's puzzling because the little guy in the middle and the left-hand guy are the only ones in this whole picture who are in, like, casual dress. It's this very formal, official looking situation, right? Except for the two of them, and he's got his hand. I see why you're thinking caretaker, right? Because he's got his hand up, like, on the arm of the kid.
There's just something about it that just looks, like, protective.
Yeah.
And he's the short hair. I mean, it looks like a servant kind of vibe. Everybody else has this long luxury.
Right.
True. No.
True.
He just looks different than the rest of them, and maybe that's a sign of class. Maybe that's a sign of role. I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah. Nobody has it's not quite a crew cut, but the guy on the left, his hair is cropped very short compared to everybody else. Yeah. Look how Savage Wolf looks with his hair down over. I mean, he looks like his father looks like a distinguished but somewhat alien tribal figure, right? Alien in the sense of being different from everybody, from the rest of them. Wolf looks like a savage. Like, he looks like he's never combed his hair before, like he looks wild.
There between the two, the seconds are like death staring each other.
Yes.
Yeah, savage.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I agree with Eric that the two wearing, you've got the two formal cloaks clasped with gold on the right, and you've got the two furs on the left. Again, clearly the matched set there. But yeah. Well, that's really interesting. So like I said, there's a lot that can be inferred based on like the first of the very few paragraphs that we get of this story in Appendix A. Yeah. That this is the context of this is the like proposal to, you know, for Wolf, the dude there on the left, the wild guy on the left, to marry Hera. And the probability that her father and brother are hostile to this idea. Yeah. Right. And yet her in the middle, not necessarily being actively involved in that. Then the next, but then her
face is nothing but worried too.
Yeah. It's hard to, her face is so remote. It's hard to tell exactly her expression, I think.
But it's not fierce. Yeah. It's not, you know, she doesn't have the same downward tilt. She just has kind of concern. And that juxtaposed to that next image of her where she's facing the other direction, going forward, powerful, determined.
Yes. Yes. The one thing that I feel like I can see in her face is like the angle of her eyes, which suggests like concern, as you say, or like, no, this is not a look of ferocity that we're seeing in her face, I think.
Or joy. I mean, she's not thrilled by whatever match is happening.
Neither direction. Yeah. Neither direction. Yeah, exactly. And then, but then as you say, the second image where we get her not only close up, but we get her closer than anybody else. She is in the foreground. And not only that, she is in the foreground in a way that nobody else is. Like this image of her, if I go back to the whole tapestry there for a minute, this image of her on the horse on the left-hand side, is in the foreground in a way that no other single image is. We get, you know, the army in the amorphous army, which is half in fire and half in ice in the foreground, but they're part of the images, right, that are in those,
and they're facing away from us.
And they're facing away. The person who's fighting against Hera when she's leaping out of the burning A-frame which I presume to be Wolf, has his back to us also. He kind of pops outwards a little bit depth-wise. But still, the two of them fighting in front of that burning A-frame is a panel, whereas her on the horse, it's like it's an extra image, right? I mean, if you think in terms of it's not in panels, like there aren't boundaries, of course. But if we were to draw boundaries or think about, I mean, the panels I would describe, there's the panel of, you know, there's the throne room panel on the far left. There's the you know, the aquatic monster panel. There's the archer and halflings in front of Orthonc panel. There's the burning elephant panel. There's the central figure that, you know, the horse isn't, it's straddling, it's on the boundary and between the two of them. It's breaking the panels. Like it's not part of any, I don't think she's fleeing from the aquatic monster. Like I don't think she's part of that story. I think, you know, that's its own story. And it sets her apart, not only because of her size, and the foregroundedness and the coming out dimensionally towards us. But it really shows, I think this is the plain broadcast of, this is, you know, she's like our protagonist,
the hero. That I'm so proud of you. That's an excellent observation and so beautifully stated. Of like, absolutely, that's the most important thing to take away from this. That she is the protagonist because she is her own panel.
She's her own panel. Yeah, she breaks she goes across the whole thing from panel to panel. Right, we see her.
And she's not supposed. Yeah, and she's not supposed to. She's not like taking us from A to B. Right. She is B. Yeah. She
is B. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And of course that also then dovetails with the whole like the prison thing, right? She's also breaking out, right? She cannot be contained in her own panel, right? She's in between panels, because that's also part of what we see her doing, is breaking out of the thing. Now, I agree with JJ that her spear is odd. And interesting. She is not carrying a standard like metal tipped spear. Like, look, the dude has a spear, right? The guard over on the far left has a perfectly serviceable spear, right? With a normal triangular metal spearhead. This is not a normal weapon like that, right? She's not in armor, and she's whatever that is. That's something odd. And to me, this feels like it. I mean, surely they could have chosen a shot with her looking more like a standard warrior. I bet they have shots of that, her dressed in more standard like armor or whatever, but they didn't. It does look like it's made of bone or something like that.
Antler or
yeah.
something.
Yeah. But and yeah, Nameless Arcanum, I agree. It looks like it's jury rigged out of bone or antler, and you can see the binding, right, in ways that it does not look like a professional weapon in the same way. Maybe it's who knows? Again, the point is not to try to speculate and understand what the story is. The point is to try to interpret, right? Again, to try to pick up what they're putting down. And what I see them putting down there is, it's like the unorthodoxy, right? This is, we don't just see her like, now she becomes a soldier, in that we were given already a model for soldiers in the left-hand panel. She doesn't just become one of them. She's something different.
And quite, yeah, exactly, organic, that it's a handmade weapon, not something that's built in a forge with artistry. It's clearly well made, but it's a different, method. And even her hair, like being loose, but being bound in that braid with a piece of leather around it, like the outfit itself is braided together. There's a very much like constructed, not like tailored, right?
Right. Yes.
It almost looks a bit elvish in some bits.
Yeah.
The design on the front of her boot and things like that. Nature-y.
Yes. Notice even her horse's mane is braided as well. Yes. So this is not just her like cutting loose or breaking loose, right? It is not merely a shot of freedom. There's more, it's more complicated than that. Even the way, like, she seems to be wearing gloves that come up above her elbow there.
Oh, I thought that was just an armband.
Is it an armband? Maybe it is. She's got one on each arm.
Yeah, I thought she was bare armed and just had
maybe it is bare armed. It's her boots seem to come up to the hip, which is what I think put me in the direction of thinking she was wearing gloves too. But anyway, yeah, she's not wearing armor, but it's her outfit here is again, it seems to me a kind of a middle thing, right? It's like, it's not armor, but it's also not like casual clothes either.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's not play clothes either. Yeah. I don't understand. I agree that it looks like the green gold is the top of her boots, but what is this leg thing? Why does it have a top boundary like that? Doesn't that look like the top of a...
I didn't think of it as the top of a boot. I thought it was like riding jodhpurs, but maybe. I see what you mean of like, but the butt side of it is a dark brown. So like, is it just
further in? Like it looks like it's, I don't know. I don't get it. I mean, I think it's interesting, but but that's what makes it look like hip boots to me. Or some kind of like legging thing. I don't know.
I'm trying to scroll over to her other one and be like, yeah.
Well, the other one, she's got a dress. She's in totally.
But she's wearing the boots though, so
yeah.
I think the boots do end before the knee, but then she just chose an interesting pair of leggings.
Really odd. I don't get it, but that's part of the. I'm okay with not getting it. Like again, it's the fact that I don't know how to parse it exactly. Like, is this armor? Is this clothing? What's happening here? That seems to me to fit this, the sort of the transitional her riding out moment that we're getting. Okay. Then we get the sea monster, or the aquatic monster. Now, I don't pretend to understand this. Maggie, you know the movies better than I do. Those arms, did the Watcher in the Water have arms like that? Like
It had big
hands? Like
arms. I
the.
don't remember the
That's
like
what I'm talking about. Yeah.
dinosaur-y ends to it.
And the
I'm gonna look it
face
up.
looks quite different. Like the little googly eyes on top with the little. I mean, I vaguely remember the face of the Watcher in the Water when it was holding up Frodo and threatening to drop it into his mouth. And I'm pretty sure like this thing looks pretty different.
Yeah.
On the one hand, the arms do seem to be tentacular. And by the way, any day in which I can use the word tentacular in a casual
Tentacular?
sentence is a good day. Or a really, really bad day, one or the other. Anyway, they do look tentacular, but they
He
don't
does
look
not
that
have.
numerous. Like
I
they,
don't see those on the image.
yeah. I
I'm looking at
don't know.
two towers and
Yeah. However, this is all we have. That is, the Watcher in the Water is all we have for context. Tolkien context. Tolkien, like book or film context. For an aquatic monster of this kind, an aquatic monster with a large recessed head and tentacular arms reaching out. Notice how they're covered over with green growth, right? Which calls to mind the stagnant greenish water of the pool in which the Watcher in the Water dwelt as well. We can see behind it this sort of like overgrown and stunted tree, which again, and the water is green that he's emerging out of. So all of that kind of tracks with what we saw in the as far as the environmental context of the Watcher in the Water in book and film.
sorry, now I'm falling down a rabbit hole and I'm looking at an image of Warhammer made a model of Watcher in the Water
Okay.
that this looks almost identical to.
Really?
Yeah. I'll
So
send
you
it to
think
you.
that like, so this might be a sort of a Weta version?
It might be. I mean, it's even got the green hue to it, and I'll give it to you in Slack if you want to have a look.
Yeah. That's interesting. Um, uh,
Anyway, that would be my, again, we don't actually know, but like from a layperson taking a look at it, that would be your association. You would assume this is a
yeah,
reference to this kind of
exactly.
creature.
Now, I can't explain that in any way. That is to say, this story will have taken place hundreds of years prior to The Lord of the Rings. If this is meant to be that same creature, are they there? So it's presumably it could have been alive if it's the same creature. Why it would come into a Rohan story when it's quite a ways away? I mean, Holland Gate is substantially far away from anywhere, like the theater of action of the story as we know it from the appendices. So I am at a loss to explain, from a book perspective, I'm at a loss to explain why either the action is going to go all the way up to the west gate of Moria in order to meet the Watcher in the Water, or why the Watcher in the Water or one of its kinsmen would come wandering about and emerge randomly somewhere in Rohan. I don't actually know. But so yeah, I cannot explain that. Thinking about the role that this plays in the image, however. So like if we set aside for a minute that I see no good explanation as to why this should be there. I mean, from a book standpoint, it doesn't seem to make any sense to me. Image-wise, the thing that's most striking about it is that, first of all, it's the first one that they give. So, like, as she on her horse is crossing the transition between the two different frames, frame 2 is monster in the background. Right? So we have her emerging from the familiar but dramatic and constrained elements of her court home out into the wild where wild things are. Right? The other thing that's most striking to me about the image is the golden sun. So the golden sun, like that soft yellow light of the sun, which is associated with her. We get a version of that yellow light a little bit warmer behind her in the archway at the beginning. As we were looking at last time, we get it again behind her with the eagle. We get it glowing out behind her as she's jumping out of the burning A-frame. We get it glowing on the faces of the charging army in the last panel. That it's like coming out so beautifully behind one of the fearsome tentacles of the monster is kind of interesting.
Coming from her, like over her, it's very much like a bathed but obstructed in that moment.
Obstructed in this moment, right? As if like, so we have both, is this like her kind of between two worlds? There's like the wild, monstrous, unknown outside, but and then there's the politically tense and constraining but familiar world that she's coming from. But this golden light that shines down on her is like following her as she transitions in between. She'll be under threat, but it'll be okay. And so the monster in this in the context of the tapestry is just designed to convey like vaguely like the totally unknown and potentially even bizarre dangers of the world outside with which she's less familiar or whatever.
Yeah, and it's kind of nice that this is like panel 3, right? Like, it's not really adding much to the plot in terms of like complexity.
Right.
It's kind of just showing us threat outside, right?
Yeah. And there are monsters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here there be monsters outside the court.
And it is more organic. It is, green hues. She's looking more organic. Maybe there is a tie between these two things, that this is one of her first challenges, that, one of her first threats that she has to overcome in her own hero journey.
Right.
Excuse me.
But as you say, whether or not it happens chronologically early in the film, that's the kind of position they've given it within the context of this tapestry.
Right. Because it serves that purpose here.
Yeah. Yeah. Then we get what is, to me, I can confidently say, the most puzzling frame of this entire thing. I'm politely confused about the Watcher in the Water, but I say politely because, like, look, like, hey, there's a fun Tolkien monster. Let's take that Tolkien monster and make it appear, because monsters are fun, is a thing that adaptations do. So, like, whatever. I'm not prepared to be shocked and appalled if, like, we get a random appearance of a Watcher in the Water in some random puddle in Rohan.
Right.
Hobbits, though, that's a different proposition. So, first of all, we get, who's the dude? The dude with the bow. Because
that's not our dating dude, is it?
It's not our antagonist, is it? Because he's not got furs. His hair is much more kempt and
he's wearing
shorter.
A very similar outfit to her.
Yes. He looks like he corresponds with her in some way. Mm-hmm. Look at their boots.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got a red lined cloak like the red cloaks of her father and brother.
But they're not identical. I mean, it's different insignia. It's different lace up. So it's like reminiscent of her, but a different clan.
I think it's probably, I think he's probably one of the Rohirrim. Yeah. But anyway, I don't think we have any other, I think this is the only place he appears. He's not in that first image, even in the background or in the foreground. None of those three guys are him. The three guys in the foreground, I mean. Clearly. So he's nowhere. This is it. Is he at the end? Could that be him with the sword? It doesn't look like him. I don't think so.
I don't think so. And he's clearly in some position of protection over those two hobbits who are unarmed and look concerned.
Yes.
So he's a protector.
And I say two hobbits, though the height differential between them is a little confusing to me.
Mm.
I mean, it makes a lovely, like, linear progression of their heads.
Right.
I mean, it's, you know,
Right.
adding to our general sense of the triangularity of things in this, like, it's lovely, but, is it possible that, like, the middle figure is like like a girl and a little kid?
Yeah. She does look more or they do look more feminine.
The one in the
It's
middle,
a
yeah.
long gown, isn't it? A long dress.
Yes.
Oh, so maybe they're just children and we assumed hobbits.
The front one looks very hobbit-like. The hair is almost exactly the same as like the, you know, like one of like the Frodo wig in the Lord of the Rings film.
Again, like just going by what we're seeing, like it could just be children, but they're really suggesting to us that it's hobbits.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine because one of the pieces of context that I think it's perfectly appropriate. No, indeed, with their trailer, they have insisted that we bring the visual language of the original films into our understanding of things here, right? And if all you had was that figure, everyone would think that was a hobbit, right? I mean, if it is a child, it's a kind of fake out, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, we're gonna assume, and we might be wrong, but you knew we were gonna assume.
In fact, like so much did that one in the front look like a hobbit that I almost called the guy with the bow the Faramir figure. Like human warrior standing with two hobbits. I was immediately thinking of Faramir when I saw him.
And very much in a protection stance. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes.
But they have their belts done in the same way. I don't know if that's important or not.
Yeah, they do. I agree with Phil that their cloaks and clasps match. Well, the clasps, they're not identical. The front one, I think they have different. No, maybe they don't have different devices. Maybe it's just different shadows. Maybe they are exactly the same.
Well,
Anyway,
one does look silver and one looks gold, but yeah, it's hard to tell.
yeah, I think it might be lighting or angle.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, they look like a matched pair, but I think they look like a male female. I think the front male, the back female, just based on the clothing that the back one look like it's wearing a dress and the front one is wearing pants is all I'm basing that on. And I think the face of the one in the middle is more feminine.
Yeah.
Older sister, younger brother.
Again,
if not
maybe
hobbit.
a protective stance. Unclear, but it is introducing to us different peoples. So it could be a counterpart to Hera that's also charging. They're facing the same direction. They have their weapons pointed out ready. So I don't think they're in the same panel. They're not in the same timeline, but
No.
there's an echo there. But introducing to us like this echo also in a position of protection against these smaller people, whether they be hobbits or children.
Yeah.
But right in front of Orthanc.
Of Orthanc, yeah. That's again, it's not 100% obvious that there is a story connection there. They might have just chosen that as a place to have Orthanc looming because they wanted it to loom somewhere, and it's looming on the front end to correspond with the Hornburg, which is looming much more in the foreground on the right hand side. But it's I mean, given what it does associate them with Orthanc. And I don't know what to make of any of that. That's the thing again that's oddest to me about this, is that these seem to me the most free floating images in the whole panel, in the whole tapestry. Free floating in the sense that we get nothing else to connect with them.
Yeah.
Like we don't see them or anything like them ever again. We don't know what comes. I mean, it's hard to say, other than the clearest cue we get, I agree with you, is the kind of harmony between the direction that they're going with Hera on the horse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their angles are all, she looks like she's riding up to support them,
Tiny.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
He's aiming that bow. The dude is aiming that bow in the same direction that she's charging towards with her spear.
Mm-hmm.
There's a sense of unification between them. Certainly not of conflict between them.
Mm-hmm.
And whether he's a hobbit or a kid, the innocent, helpless, adorable little expression on the guy's face, I mean, you know, that's as like
innocent.
Yes. Help.
Yeah.
Save the innocent. Like that says save the innocent as clearly as anything could, right?
Yeah.
So now the taller figure, older girl, perhaps behind him, looks much more resolute, right? Her expression is, she does not have a helpless expression on. She looks much more stern, and she's sort of standing behind him and much taller, as if she's looming semi-protectively, but she has no weapon or anything with which to protect him. But she has the light, so she's like the guiding figure, right? He's the guy with the bow is the protection, and she's the guide. I don't know, but he's helpless, clearly. Mm-hmm. A totally passive, but both of his hands, that his left hand is clenched in a fist, but he's got nothing in his hands. Anyway, this sort of would seem to suggest, it's interesting because if you imagine, we think just of the first couple steps that we took, right? Hera leaving, right? Mm-hmm. That looks like it's just the story is just about her. Like she's what is at stake here. Her own destiny is what is at stake. But helpless little innocent dude, and with her riding in the direction of where it seems the threat is coming based on the bow and arrow dude behind him, would suggest that there's somebody else that she's trying to save and not just herself. Is not only to form her own destiny.
Yeah, when you take that as a progression, where you think that's only there for her to be a solo protagonist, that's what we see. But nope, keep going. It's going to align you with a bigger part of the story. It's a really nice way to kind of establish her, put in a nonsensical reference of a threat with the sea monster, and then take us into these guys saying, no, there is something bigger going on. Look at where this is leading.
Right.
And introduces us again to different peoples.
Yeah.
So it's just building our world at the same time.
Right. Now, the next panel is the burning elephant panel. And the next panel is the burning elephant panel. And in the background, we get Edoras on fire. Mm-hmm. And the fire extends all the way up from the troops in the front, around the elephant, and up to the city on the hill up top. And now, knowing what we know not only from the book but from the films, which this film seems to be taking as given, right? Then we know that the building that we see apparently on fire in this picture is the one that we see. I mean, that's Meadowsail. That's the interior that we see on the left-hand side. So we're kind of going backwards in space, but forwards in time with that next step, right? Okay. And we don't actually see flames like leaping out of the windows or something. The flames that we see are all kind of around it, as if like they could just be superimposed on top of it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're seeing the hall on fire itself. Mm-hmm. The city is clearly on fire. Like the houses in the city are very definitely on fire. Here's another thing that's kind of interesting. The dudes in the foreground the warriors in the foreground. At the beginning, I keep zooming in and scrolling around. The guys at the beginning give us these two sides, which are very separate stylistically, as we were discussing, right? Mm-hmm. But when we get to the battle scenes, which ones are these guys in the front? Are they the dudes from the left, or are they the dudes on the right? Like which affiliate are we seeing? Yeah. And it's hard to tell. Mm-hmm. I don't know that we know that. And in fact, I suspect it's both. That is, I suspect that in the film, it's going to be the Rohirrim fighting the elephant, the Mumakil, but it's going to be the Dunlendings who are besieging the Hornburg in the ice. But as you've already pointed out, there's no boundary in between. There's this continuity between them. And that's a fascinating point. Like, if I'm reading that correctly, then it suggests that this divide that we see at the beginning kind of breaks down. Like, can you tell the difference between the Dunlendings and the Rohirrim? Right? This I think suggests that we're not this is not a clear good guys against the bad guys kind of situation, because they're merging into each other here.
And they're all working together against an elephant?
Well, the ones on the left are working against the elephant. The ones on the right are attacking the frozen dude with the hammer.
The frozen dude.
Who is Helm.
And you can't tell who is what. Yeah.
Well, the only one you can tell is, well, I mean, again, this from book knowledge, I feel confident in saying is Helm.
Yeah.
Would you like the fun spoiler?
Bring it.
I think he's dead.
He doesn't look...
I know.
Yeah.
Exactly. Part of the story of Helm is that he goes out while they're besieging, the Dunlendings are besieging him in the Hornburg. He goes out at night by himself to raid their camp and kill anybody he finds. And despite the fact that they have the King of Rohan on his own outside the walls, he is so terrifying that they run away from him.
Well, and look at him.
In the end, his cause of death, he freezes to death. And they find him standing defiantly and rigid and frozen to death. And the Dunlendings were still afraid of him. They were afraid of him, of his frozen corpse standing there. So okay, I think this is Helm's corpse that we're actually
I was going to say, I don't think that's a think. That feels a pretty solid, because, I mean, look how long he's been standing there. He has icicles all over him. The icicles
forming on him. Yeah, exactly. Right, Eric says cause of death, badassery. Yeah.
Yes, I was going to say, I'm like, that is such a good statement of he's still so scary even in death. It's yep, cause of death.
Yeah, this is where among the Dunlendings, legends grow that Helm ate the bodies of the men that he killed when he was like a troll when he was out roving. It's a really dark and peculiar moment. I mean, it's one of the weird, dark, cool elements that made me say immediately oh, that could be that's going to be really interesting to see on film. And that's what I think we're seeing there. But so we've got the frozen Helm and the burning elephant. The guy who is jumping down to cleave the head of the elephant is definitely, from Rohan. We can tell by his armor that he is. In fact, if his fetching little flying forelocks are any indication, it's her brother. Hair-wise, that looks like this dude with his little that's what I'm thinking. Kind of looks like him. Shaved sides of the head, little. Anyway,
I don't know. I can't tell if that's the same dude or not. I see what you're saying.
from internal connections on this image, that's the one that he looks most like.
I can only imagine what my face looks like being this close to my laptop, so apologies. But I'm like staring. They look like two different people to me, but I understand the reference. Like when you look at the two images, they don't look like the same character, but we have the hair, we have the forelocks.
Right.
I can see that reference. I don't know. The uniforms are totally different though too.
Yeah, well, this is his battle armor and the other is his formal outfit, you know. He's not really in armor, he's in court apparel on the left-hand side. So anyway, whether or not it's the same person, but the point is we have a clearly Rohirrim guy coming down. Totally. But again, that just, if anything, seems to me to solidify the initial observation. If it's it's clearly the men of Rohan who are fighting against the Mumak on the left-hand side. But it must clearly be the Dunlendings who are fighting against Helm, their king, on the right-hand side. And so therefore, that merging of the warriors in the foreground definitely does blend Dunlendings and Rohirrim together in a very intriguing and suggestive way. But we're running out of time, so we should keep going. The frozen Hornburg merges into the terrace where we see Hera now almost totally eclipsed by the sun, or almost eclipsing the sun, right?
Yeah.
The golden light of the sun. Speaking with an eagle, a very, very large eagle.
Ginormous eagle.
Yeah. Which is cool. Like, you know, Thorondor was the size of a 747, so it's okay. I'm okay with that. This is pushing the raggedy edge of how big the eagles should be, but it's okay. 30 fathoms, I think. Yeah, it's his wingspan, Thorondor's. Anyway, whatever. This is a big eagle. Who is the dude backpacking up the stairs behind her?
Like delivering pizzas? I mean, it's such a specific shape to that backpack.
It looks like he's got a chest strapped to his back.
Yeah, and like a perfect cube.
Right, or a pizza delivery box, I agree.
And the steps leading up through an arch, and then her being directly above that. I mean, it's not like he's a pathway to her, but they are clearly in the same line.
Yeah, they seem associated together, though when you look closely, it's like, I mean, I guess maybe it switches back up to the left and you can get, but it doesn't look like it connects to her, to where she's standing.
And there's that wall behind him.
Yes.
I'm not sure which part that connects to either.
I think that's the foreground of the final charge picture. That's the deeping wall.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. It just stretches over there.
Yeah, it merges into that.
That's a beautiful way to tie those two bits together.
Which puts Hera leaping out of the burning A-frame at Wolf forcibly in the foreground because we can see the whole wall behind it on both sides.
And that really makes the background... Yeah, she's really splitting that singularity of the right third of it.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Disrupting it.
So the proportion between her and that glow, we were associating it with, it looks like a glow of hope, or at least of, certainly in the final image, it looks like a glow of hope, right? The way that they're facing into that golden sunlight, that yellow sunlight and charging. Certainly, especially given that this charge, with them charging downhill, obviously looks like the end of, the end of the Battle of Helm's Deep in the film, right? With Aemir charging down the hill at dawn and whatever. But anyway, if that's the light of hope, that light of hope is totally practically consuming her, right, in this picture with the eagle coming right under the wings of the eagle, right? We've got the outstretched wings of the eagle and the light of hope shining through it, with her being sort of embraced beneath it. And then,
And
go ahead.
again, coming from like any layperson that has maybe seen the Peter Jackson trilogy and doesn't have, the depth of lore or whatever, they would see this and see it as kind of maybe a peaceful moment of power or stepping into like a righteous role, because we only know the eagles as being helpful
Yeah.
and powerful. So having her back to us and look so small against this great eagle in that beam of light, it just feels like, I don't know, like she's having a conversation with her wise mentor, being like, "It
Yes.
is time. Step into who you are." And then that next scene, we have her barreling at us.
Yes. Yeah. The eagle is very much does look more. This does look more like a, the part in the hero's journey where she's consulting the mentor hermit in the wilderness, right? Like this eagle is her Yoda.
Or
In
like
this.
Mufasa in the sky.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
Simba, it is time. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what it
Exactly.
felt like.
And then, as Katie was pointing out, of course, we see the eagle on the bodice of her dress
Yeah.
in her final charging scene, right? So, yes, yes. Yeah. Let's
It's a
see.
lovely progression from the snow to the fire too, because it's warm and bright, but it's not fire.
Yes. Yeah. Notice the clouds in the background. We get the like sunrise coloration on the clouds in the
Hmm.
mountains in the background, and that sunrise, the orangey sunrise color on those clouds, serves as a transition between the
Hmm.
white yellow sunlight to the left of her and the flames that we see on the A-frame,
Hmm.
right, which are up near her, suffused with that golden white yellow color that's shining behind her. But then we've got the darker, uglier orange flame color down at the bottom around Wolf and Wolf's legs there.
And the really striking, now I'm over in the A-frame, but the striking yellow, we don't have a bold color like that really anywhere else. And we
Oh,
have
on
it
her shield, you mean?
on the shield.
Yeah,
It's the sun,
yeah,
the flowers in her hair, and the double horse head hilt on her swords. Like tying those three things together is really powerful. We have a nice like triangle of,
yes.
the triumvirate of power with the sun, the horse, crown, and then the eagle on her chest in the middle of it. That's a really powerful triangle. That's cool.
It is cool.
Mm.
Yeah, it is cool. And then Wolf himself, who is now crowned,
Mm-hmm.
and he's got, as Eric was pointing out, feathers on his blade as well. His blade, which is the most prominent thing, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even if we go all the way out to full width, his blade stands out,
Mm-hmm.
that curved blade, which points up directly to the center of her body, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's also, there aren't that many curved things. I mean, we talked about triangles. There aren't that many curved things in this image. There's the
Mm-mm.
arms, there's the tentacular arms, there's the tusks of the Mumok, and there's
There's
his
the
sword.
and there's arches. I mean, there's a lot
Yeah,
of like
there's arches, but
framing
that's not the same.
arches.
I mean, like
No, it's
a
not.
a
That's a
curved,
structural.
like a yeah, like a not a full, not a full rounded thing. Um, yeah, and all of them, yes, Eric, all of them are threats. All of them seem to be threats.
Mm.
Yeah, curves are bad, triangles good. I agree. That's kind of what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying here. Um, and yet, the feathers on his, the only thing that we have to associate with that wing, those feathers on his blade, is the eagle's wing. And indeed, we see feathers very similar on her bodice, right, on her dress. Those feathers are very similar stylistically to the feathers on his knife.
And he's got a bit of feathers around the cuff of his sleeve too, isn't he? Like between the gauntlet and the upper arm.
Has a little ruff there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Phil, I am thinking about that. Something like his usurpation, or even his, like, he's like the twisted version, right?
Like I'm stepping into that.
Yeah. But again, his version of this is crooked. Notice the light on his face. The light on his face is the white yellow light, right? Like he's looking at the sun, and that sunlight is shining on his face.
And it kind of looks like it's burning him a little bit. He doesn't look comfortable. He does not
look pleased. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And he's turned away. He's not staring at her.
No, he's kind of like.
Yes, he's turned away. But again, with the way that, I mean, the light sources are really interesting because there's multiple of the way that the images all kind of merge together means there's multiple light sources. So on the one hand, there's the fire. On the other hand, there's the yellow white light that's shining behind her. And yet the left side of his face, which is turned away from all of that, is brightly lit, right? It would make sense in multiple ways. Physically, like by physics, it would make sense. And even artistically, it would seem to make sense if the side of his face were in shadow, the side of his face towards us, right? Yeah. If his face were shadowy, juxtaposed against the light that's coming from her, because he's backlit, right? We'd expect that. But instead, it's not. He's lit. And as if by the light that's shining out from around her in the previous picture, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Stealing the light from there.
Yeah. It's fascinating. And again, notice how straight and appropriately triangular her sword and her arm are. Right? Again
like really making that.
Yeah.
This is when you want to like break out your tracing paper and put it over it and be like, see, look at this triangle. And,
yes.
And the triangle shaped by the A-frame spiked out by the straight lines, and then the curve of his sword kind of cutting into that.
And look at her belt coming down to form a point again, like reflecting, like mirroring the A-frame up above. Even her boot tops, right? All of there's like that kind of that triangular arrowhead shape is all over the place there. And they're all agreeing. They're all pointing down. They're all pointing down towards him. Even the wings of the eagle form that same, and the top of her bodice, which is formed by the wings of the eagle. All of those are forming that same kind of V. Very interesting. And yes, as Eric was suggesting, we get lots of straight lines in her earlier costume, the one on the horse. We don't get all of those V's. Like her belt is straight across. Her belt and there's the vertical lines of her tunic, right? And there's like two belt straps, the one under her breasts and the one around her waist. And those are both perpendicular, right? The armbands all perpendicular to those.
Yeah, this is a very different Hera in the second one.
Yes.
And so much more I always struggle with this word, iconography. Iconography.
Yes.
That she's got the gauntlets, she's got the eagle, she's got the crown, she's got the double horse heads, she's got the signal on her boot. There's so much other stuff going on that feels like a strong identifier, whereas in the other one it's like, nope. Just made this outfit up so I could function.
Yeah.
This feels like I'm fighting for something, I'm standing for something, I'm representing something.
And I just realized, as you said, the crown, I'd forgotten about that. We observed that last time. but she's got a crown and so does he. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
it's like the marriage scene that comes after the first panel, right? The first panel is the
Right.
the marriage proposal, right, which doesn't go well. But then this is like obviously this is not a honeymoon scene on the right hand side, but we see the two of them crowned, right? There is that sort of suggested implicit connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
But ooh, she looks pissed.
Yes. Yes.
And he, I mean, like we talk a lot on Rings and Realms about positions of power and stuff. Like she is so clearly over him,
Yes.
pushing
Descending from
down
above.
onto
Yes.
him.
Yes.
He's looking away. Like, I mean, we can't see his right arm, but it feels like he's like this, like trying to protect
Yeah,
himself.
his shoulders are turned to the side. Also, he's not even squarely facing her.
And his arm is back. He's not defending. He's not advancing. He's
Yes,
receiving.
even if he has like a shield in his right hand side, he still looks
Hmm.
exposed. Certainly, whereas she is all focused and kind of committed to the action. Right? Um,
Hmm.
he's ooh, Mrs. Manrick. No, she isn't. He is left-handed. Yeah, he's left-handed. There it
He
is
is
again, Maggie.
left-handed. Can't
Left-handed.
escape it. Once you notice it, you can't escape it.
Left-handed is evil. I'm sorry. Like my sister's left-handed, no offense, but like, yeah,
I
it's
think
a
my
thing.
daughter is, but she's got her moments.
That's right.
Um,
Right.
I'm also wondering, I don't know, but like, sometimes in anime they do an editing cutaway where you've seen it from two different perspectives.
Yeah,
This almost looks like that could be that to me too.
right,
Like he is actually looking at her dead on, but we're seeing it from a different camera's perspective. So like I
right,
kind of want to take him and turn him 90 degrees
right.
so he is facing her. So maybe he's only tilted to show us this different perspective and it reflects kind of an anime style.
Right.
I could see that. Like if there was movement to this, I would expect the animation to work that way.
Yeah, it's
Because
interesting.
the angle is weird how he's looking.
It is.
He's either shying away or we're seeing just a different perspective of
Well,
his cut.
certainly, he is looking all the way. Like he's looking backwards. Right.
Hmm.
He's looking backwards.
Hmm.
She's charging straight out, and he's looking backwards.
And he's not advancing. I mean, his
Right.
hand is not moving forward. He
Right.
is not
Yeah.
moving forward.
Agreed. Um, yeah. Really interesting.
All right.
Oh, is it? Yeah, good question. Hang on. One last question. I gotta go because I gotta run. Is he
That's
wearing the
right.
same crown? There's Helm's crown at the beginning. It's a circlet with okay. Looking at that and then looking back at Wolf. Looks very similar. It looks like it's got a red gem right above his nose,
Hmm.
whereas Helm's looks kind of bluish. But other than that, I mean, it certainly looks the same style.
Does. But king and prince, sure.
Yeah, that he has seized and
Hmm.
has usurped the crown of Helm. Um,
And Helm's
and of
not
course
wearing his.
checks out book-wise too. So,
Mm.
but anyway, okay, all right. I got to run.
Okay.
This was really fun though.
This was pretty fun.
It's really
Um,
great. I hope it'll be fun to look at more trailers when we get more trailers from the War of the Rohirrim. But I gotta say, like, I hope they give us more images.
yeah, like
this was cool.
this
All
is
right.
really fun.
Thanks for joining us. So we're kind of trying to decide what to talk about next, and I don't have much time to talk about it because I got to leave. But we were wondering about the possibility of maybe doing some other kind of adaptation project in between. That is in between now and when next like War of the Rohirrim stuff comes starts coming out closer to the release date, and we've got this little kind of interlude here before Christmas comes a little early to do Christmas stuff, but
No, it's
anyway,
not.
I'm one thing that really interested me. I was telling Maggie before we started, I performed one of the experiments that I said I was gonna do, which is reverse adaptation, analysis. That is, I read the book of a movie that I'd seen and knew well. So for Halloween this past weekend, my family watched The Shining, and The Shining is a brilliant film. I think it's a brilliant and a gorgeous film. And so I was really enjoying. We had a really fun discussion, my wife and son and I, after we watched the film on Friday night. And I was like, this is a great movie. But watching it this time, for whatever reason, I was like, you know what? I have never read the book. I'm going to go read the book. So this is like, I knew the movie, like I've seen the movie like a bunch of times now. And I had just been like watching and so I just read the book, and I just finished it last night. So in like 48 hours, I read The Shining, and it was really good. It was really good and really interesting. And so to me, it's a fascinating example of a good book and a good film, which both tell really good stories, and the stories are quite different, right? It's a close adaptation in many ways. A whole bunch of lines lifted straight from the text and everything. And yet the story that's being told in the film is quite different from the story that's being told in the book. And the endings are very, very different. I don't know if Kubrick had a lower special effects budget than Stephen King did, but there's more special effects at the end of the book. But anyway, it
got us thinking about like different techniques and different, ways that we can think about and approach adaptations. And, there's not one thing that we've all read and have seen the film of. So it'd be real handy if there was like a singular thing that we could do as a bit of a workshop. But we're kind of thinking we might do something like that in the next.
Yeah, thinking about because it was a fascinating experience to me, because I am sure, basically I was seeing the differences. But when I went the other direction, the main thing I was finding is that when I go the other direction, I didn't have that resistance. Like, I was perceiving the differences, but I wasn't like, oh no, they're messing it up, right? Like, I was like, because I wasn't like, oh, Stephen King's going to ruin the movie, But had I known the book really well and then watched the film, I think I would have been more resistant to many of the things that Kubrick did in the film. Anyway, so there's. It would be interesting to look at a kind of an example like that, I think.
Well, and I'm laughing because I was looking at the chat and I was like, oh, let's see what people are up to. And it's like Muppet, Lord of the Rings. We can do that. Godzilla would be an interesting one. I don't know it super well enough, but I've seen all of them. And Godzilla -0 was really fascinating. I don't know. We'll have to think about it. But if there's things that are on your minds.
Yeah. Another thing, Maggie, you were suggesting before was like looking at an adaptation of an adaptation as well.
Yeah, because I was thinking about Wicked, which I haven't seen yet, but we can't do that one because it's so new. But we could easily find something like it. Like Wicked is an adaptation of a stage play, which is an adaptation of a book. So, taking a singular story, there's lots like that we can pull into different.
And which corresponds with other stories as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But, yeah. Anyway, we're thinking about going and doing another of these kind of adaptation case study things, So we'll see.
We'll muse on that.
We'll muse on that.
Disney might be a good route to go down.
Yeah.
Most folks have a general understanding of those stories.
Yeah.
A movie adaptation of a comic book adaptation of a history like 300. That's a good one, Eric.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Gladiator. Exactly. Anyway, we can do this all day.
Yeah.
We'll have a thing.
Right. I should run. But thanks everybody for joining us. And one way or another, we'll see you guys soon.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.